for fighting fires.
Stay in the York.
Round it at the bottom so you couldn't put it down and use it for something else, and it'll wind up in the mop block or whatever you call it.
Do they use water or sand?
Don't know. I'd
Okay.
say one or the other.
Yeah.
Maybe both on occasion.
I guess sand you can use it as a
One thing, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, for incendiaries.
Yes.
You know, if they're incendiary bombs, you know, that's phosphorus. Water just spreads it out.
Right, yeah.
Sand would smother it. Christmas tree, very typical, Second World War, whatever. Probably palm trees in the South Pacific, you'd have it adorned. But it's an example of that. Meramite. These things I saw all through my military career. In 1996, when I got out, we were still taking these to the field. And they could fill it up with ice cream, which was always very desirable, or hot food, which is more nourishing, obviously. And I saw on the news the thing down on the Mexican border, you know, some of the more remote places for the Army. I still see these things being pulled out. So that's how the food is getting out to the field. Meramite cans.
If it works, those sets changes the design.
Tuskegee Airmen. This is an all-black unit, the Second World War. About 400 of the men actually saw combat. There's like 2,000 of them, but a lot of them never got into combat. The war ended before they could, get over there. Very, very proficient organization. They flew primarily protection for the bombers that went up after the oil fields. These guys would go up and they would fight off anybody trying to shoot them down. There's a myth that they never lost a bomber, which as soon as I heard that, I says, this can't be. It can't be. This is bogus. And another myth further down the line we'll talk about. But the thing is, I did some research on it, and the worst scenario was they lost half as many bombers as any other four other groups. So you were greatly happy to have these people flying along with you. There's also a myth about their red tails. They're known as the red tails. And the myth is that they wanted the Germans, this is rubbing their nose in the face of the Germans, that it was black men shooting them down with their racial craziness, superiority, Superman, kind of thing. They wanted the Germans to know that they were being shot down by these inferior races. However, I did some research on that too, and it turns out they just had a lot of red paint they didn't have anything else to do with. So we kind of, I like to stick with that first. I like to stick with that first one. There's something very appealing about rubbing the Germans' noses. After the war, they still maintained that they were still a unit after the Second World War, and they continued to outfly everybody in competitions, gunnery, that kind of stuff. So they were really super pilots. Picture here of a group of pilots. At the end is Barry Goldwater.
Wow.
Barry Goldwater was the Republican candidate in 1964 against LBJ. And if you remember, remember the Daisy commercial? There's a little bit, the Democrats put forth a commercial to shoot him down very successfully. He was a general in the Army. And the Daisy Girl was a commercial with a picture of a little girl, and she's picking daisies. Loves me, she loves me not. And it's a very idyllic scene. But as 10 seconds transpire, the background starts to get real dark, and you start to hear echoes, and something ominous is entered in the picture. And she gets down to loves me not, number 9, loves me not, and then at number 10, she looks up, and there's a huge nuclear explosion in the background. Very effective commercial. I think he carried the state of Arizona and no place else in that campaign. But anyway, he was a Thunderbolt pilot during the war. Another one is Gabrinsky. He's a local guy, actually. He shot down 34 enemy aircraft in 2 different wars. He's one of the few people who were an ace in the Second World War, stayed in, and was an ace in the Korean War. These aircraft were used initially, the Thunderbolt was used initially, and that's the focus of this, see pictures of them all over the place. The P-47 is the Thunder. Initially it was used as an air-to-air aircraft, but that was superseded by the Mustang, which was much better for air-to-air combat. And this kind of got relegated to close air support. Close air support is when you're down on the ground, chasing things on the ground and dropping bombs. The Germans hated them. They were more afraid of these than anything. They called them J-bows. They just ranged and had a good time just shooting up anything they felt like. The danger with that is, though, you were close to the ground. If you got into any trouble, you didn't have altitude. There's some kind of saying in the Air Force, if you have altitude, you have time, you can deal with it. But if you're down at 200, 300 feet, something goes wrong. You're going, that's what happened to Gabby, okay? He was a little bit too low, his propeller hit, he crashed, he evaded them for 3 days and then was captured. But like I say, he went on to bigger and better things. One other thing about the Tuskegee men, a couple of them were captured, and I researched what happened to these guys, because these were inferior people, according to the Germans. But it turns out they were treated no different than any other airmen, and it was pretty good treatment, all things considered. They were really well treated, all of them. And it was towards the end of the war, so maybe the Germans were starting to think, you know, we murdered these guys, we're going to answer for it someday. I don't know. Okay. Here you see Gabrinsky with a bunch of local kids. Up here also, Gabrinsky at the end, Millville Airport. Well, we actually had a Thunderbolt. We're trying to get an actual Thunderbolt here. It's pretty difficult. This is one of the most prolific and best inches in the Second World War. It has all sorts of manifestations. Initially, this was one engine, right? This is a twin. It's a twin with which you have. It's a radial engine. So, you know, it's sort of like a blast or a V8 or something like that. This is a radial engine where the pistons are coming in from all different angles. And they, on some of these engines, initially it was just one bank, and that was the Wasp engine. This is a twin Wasp, and they had as many as 5 banks for special purposes. But it's among the most prolific. A lot of aircraft throughout the war had them. Even you'll see in a minute Zeppelins over here. Some the light and air used the original engine to propel it. So it was all over the place. It had a lot of applications. It was also air cooled. You see the fins. So when the enemy shot up your engine, on some occasions you could shoot one of these heads completely off, and there'd be one piston just blowing oil out, but you could continue and get back to base. If you're in an water-cooled engine like the P-51 that we looked at, you know, or any of the other, most of the aircraft were water-cooled. But any kind of leak, all of a sudden your whole engine is shot. So air-cooled is the way to go, and this really served the function. Ejection seat. This is not from the Second World War. It's subsequent to the Second World War. The Germans, though, did have them with their jets. They did have some ejection seats. And I saw some reference to 1910, when you were like in the infancy of aviation. Some screwball had a bungee cord kind of arrangement to get out of that aircraft. I didn't think they even were using parachutes back that far, because you can't eject out without, you got to have a parachute. So at least a parachute technology had to be there. But it was in 1910. But these things, because when the aircraft became so fast and so powerful, there's no climbing out on a wing and hopping off anymore. You had to eject. And this, I think, is the second generation. The first generation, and I have some experience with this, is a shroud up here. You have 2 great big loops over your head as the pilot or the RO, the radio operator, or radar operator. And to get out, you would grab these and pull it down, and at some point, as you're protecting your face with this shroud, it would trigger the explosion and blow you out of the airplane. From this, it went on to this arrangement where either one of these would eject. If you have a broken arm or something from combat injury, either one of those would get you out of the airplane. And then they went to down here. That's what they have now, I think, for the most part. Maybe some of you guys have some experience with later model aircraft. I think there's a loop down here that ejects, gets you out of the airplane. Recently, in the last 10 years or so, they injected at Mach 3 on one of the B1, something like that. They injected at Mach 3, but it was pods. You were enclosed in a container as you were kicked out in all different directions from this aircraft in distress. I trained on one of these. There was a thing going on when I was very early in my military career where if you were trained on a couple of things and they have an opportunity ever presented itself for you to hop in a back seat, you could do that, provided you had some training. So I went through the training, and it involved this and a couple of other things. And we went down to this place where they had this great big huge rail, big black, ominous looking thing with a seat on it. And when you executed, you would shoot up this rail and then come back down, like an amusement ride. What they told us was, though, and I didn't pay attention enough, is when you pull that shroud down, do not let your head come forward because of the shock that dries you up. And lo and behold, I let it come forward, and I paid for it for a couple of weeks. There are new seats that are known as 0-0. In other words, this thing could be sitting on the tarmac, and if you have to get out of it, you can just. It used to be you had to have altitude, you had to have speed, a bunch of things. But 0-0 seats, even sitting on an aircraft carrier, and things going to hell, and you have to get out, it'll blow you high enough that the chute can deploy, and you can deal with it. I couldn't believe it when I read it, but people who eject lose 1 inch, can lose an inch of height. Now that sounds ridiculous. Think about the neurological things that are going on. You have nerves radiating out. It's kind of hard to believe. One source said 2 inches. I lost 2 inches. But that had to entail such trauma to the spinal cord that it beggars belief, really. I find it still hard to believe. But a couple of different sources say 1 inch of height. You're 1 inch, 2 inches shorter. Over here we have the turbocharger for this. Turbocharger compresses air. You need two things for an internal combustion. You need gas and you need air. At sea level it works fine, but as you get higher, air is very thin and you have to compress it. And that's what the turbocharger did. So above 12,000 feet, 15,000 feet, they really needed this in order to fight. Okay, over here we have a little display about lighter than air. This is a picture of what can go wrong when you're lighter than air and you're using hydrogen. Yes. Incredibly, in reading on this, there were almost 100 people in this, and only 37 of them died. And if you actually see the film, when this was higher up, you see people, little black objects falling as people abandon this thing up in the air. And only 33, 37 of them died, like 1/3. 2/3 got away, badly burned, but they at least got away. This is the Akron. This is a little bit, I think this is a little bit later. No, this was earlier, but they were using helium with it. This thing crashed off the Vonnegut Beach. And it had 73 people on it, and only 3 people survived that. So a bunch of people survived this, but this thing, only 3 out of a crew of 70 or 80 people survived it. This thing was helium now. Helium is not explosive or burning. So you could shoot that with incendiaries and nothing's going to happen. This thing carried parasite aircraft. It was a failed concept, but they had a whole, you could have 5 airplanes inside of that. They had a whole arrangement. They would swing it down, they would start the engine, they would swing it out, it would hang underneath, then it would disconnect, and this thing would fly away, and it would come back later on, fly up, hook onto this, and so with the engine idling, they bring it up and bring it. So there's a whole hangar in this also. Another thing they had that didn't work at all was from the First World War, the Germans used these in bombing London. But the Zeppelins would want to stay in the clouds. They didn't want to come down where they could be seen and shot at. So they had this bucket. They would lower a bucket with an observer on it down through the clouds and stuff to look around and phone back up as to what's going on. They tried that on this, but it was a total failure. They actually almost damaged the aircraft. The thing was swinging so wildly that it could have damaged the aircraft. Also during the war, when I was a kid, in the late 1950s, I used to play out in the woods up around South Amboy and Sayreville. 2 summers. I don't know why this thing showed up in the middle of the summer, but a Navy blimp would come in. It would come in at low altitude. Like, you look up, the sky is full of this monstrous thing right over our head. My wife says, I'm imagining this kind of stuff. I said, it was so phenomenal. She says, how can that be? What is it doing flying on Raritan Bay? We're starting to get crazy thoughts like that. But it happened. There was one time I was out there and there was a kid shooting at 22. And again, this sounds so far-fetched, I can't believe it's true. This idiot kid started, it was a semi-automatic 22. He started shooting bullets up into this thing. I got away from him. I never heard anything, so he really didn't do any damage. In fact, with helium, they might not even discover the holes. But during the Second World War, they used blimps, not the dirigible. The dirigible has a frame, like you can see the frame on this. A blimp doesn't have any frame on the inside, just a big bag. But they used blimps in the Navy to escort convoys. And what would happen is they had a radar range of 90 miles. So when they were up there, flying over there, they could see out the surface 90 miles. And any submarine that wasn't perfectly placed would have to get on the surface and race to engage the convoys. So this thing would pick them up and would vector people into it. They also had a magnetic sensor, where if they fly over one, which I was very surprised to see, flying over something big and metallic, they would get a reading. One of them got shot down in the whole war, only one. He got close enough to the surface, and the Germans shot him down. Supposedly only one ship was ever lost while it was protected by blimps. This is the very first one, 1903. This is a little memorial to a brave, probably a typical pilot in the Second World War. This is led to us by the family. In fact, I saw the son not too long ago who is lending this to us. I don't think they want to give it to us. But his father in the Second World War was a pilot on a B-17, and his ship got shot up horribly. Every single person in the crew was shot up with shrapnel, including him. And you could see the damage to his helmet. He immediately lost sight in one eye. He was deaf for the rest of his life in one ear. But somehow he managed to get that ship back to England and land it and receive a medal for it. But there was he could have, but I don't think any pilot in the Second World War would have abandoned everybody to his death by leaving his station. So he managed to get it back, and this is an example of what men went through. And also consider his whole crew, all 12 people or whatever it was, are back there thrashing around, guts, blood all over the place. That's a scenario that this guy was dealing with. American hero, typical American hero. This is another minority. There's a couple of minorities here. There's the Tuskegee Airmen, there's the Japanese Americans. This is another minority that we kind of like to highlight, the Navajo Code Talkers. And you may have seen the movie. I thought it was a particularly terrible movie. And what you would use these people for is they had their own language. And when the Japanese tapped into the wires, it was mostly you would string wire, and the Japanese could tap into it and hear what's going on. That when these two Navajos were talking to each other, there was no understanding of what was going on. You had a lot of Japanese who could handle English, but nobody could handle this. I think that maybe if any of you see the movie,
Yeah.
Was what I forget what his name was. Was he there to kill him in the case of capture?
Yeah.
See, now that's baloney. That's baloney. That is not true. I did a little research on that too, and the only reference to it is in the Navajo get-together many years afterwards. That came up as a small little item, and everybody just disabused themselves of it. It was never really the reality. A lot of Indians fought in the Second World War. They saw it as a test of their warrior mystique. In fact, right here, Up there's one Indian, Ira Hayes, you know, who subsequently died a alcoholic in a puddle of water, of all things. But, you know, he was right there with a lot of other Indians. They were used, not just in the Second World War by the Marines, they were used in the First World War. They were used in every Marine division, and, you know, in the capacity of a coach. They were trained Marines. They went through basic training, then they got extra training. This is supposed to be a radio setup for the base. It's not built over a couple of times. Every time I walk past you, as many times I've done it, I'm always surprised by this guy sitting there. And you would think after a while I would anticipate it, but he always stops me. But anyway, it's a little bit bogus, but this is, we had one of our members actually was here as a radio operator. And he kind of put this all together. There's a couple of things there that are transistor-wise, so it's bogus in that respect. But also Morse code. That really, on a base like this, would have no application whatsoever. Morse code is for like really long distance stuff. And if you were talking to airplanes in the local area, and if you had to talk to anybody in Washington, you had your telephone. So there was no need for this. And of course, a pilot can't be flying a plane and still trying to decipher that kind of stuff. So it had to be a lot more simple. Well, this is what's left of the Philadelphia Seaport Museum. It was established way back, I think, in the 20s. And it was a popular place to go for a lot of people. Aviation was kind of in its infancy, and you know, a great leap forward was when they could take off from water. And once you can take off from water, you don't have to worry about wind direction, or you just have to make sure you fly off. You don't have to orientate on a runway when the wind is not. What am I trying to say? You can always fly into the wind when you're on water, regardless of other considerations. You have to take off, you have to land into the wind, or you're in trouble. So landing on water, a big body of water, you never had that problem at all. And that was within 7 years. The first recorded incident of a plane taking off from water was by a Frenchman in 1910. And to look at this contraption, it looks like a child's rendition of an airplane. It was like a big board, which was the wing, with a box on top of it. And sitting on top of the box is this man with some rudimentary controls. At the bottom of the board, there were a couple of pontoons. But he managed to get this thing airborne 7 years after the very first flight, which I thought was kind of amazing and brave. So the Airport Museum was founded by the Mills family. Very early, it was Orville and the Wright brothers, then it was Curtis. Curtis trained a lot of people, of which Mills was one of them. So they're very fundamental in the history of aviation. This is one of the aircraft that was down there. This is the actual nose over one of the aircraft. Say that. Oh, I would think not. No, I think we have some parts of airplanes that they don't stand well over time. Plus, they didn't have all of the aluminum kind of products and stuff that we would have. They were really put together with a lot of cases glue and such as that. But the only other thing here that's of significance, I think, is this letter, and it's signed by Billy Mitchell. And it's a nondescript letter, but it does have his signature and it has some value. He is informally known as the father of the Air Force because he was espousing air power to attack ships in 1920, 1923. And the Navy establishment didn't want to hear this. They were old-fashioned. It was a battleship war. Battleships would get into position, cross the T, and shoot up each other. He thought that was outdated. He thought that aviation was going to change everything. So by being insubordinate, and he was incredibly insubordinate, and eventually got kicked out, under that pretext. He managed to get 4 German battleships that were captured after the First World War. And he had his squadron go out and bomb and sink these 4 German battleships. But still, that wasn't enough of the advocacy. They thought it was a fluke, this, that, and the other thing. But enough people in the system realized that even though the big brass is saying, no, I know better, and they started to plan, and it got us in a higher state of preparation when the kimchi hit the fan in 1941. We were a lot better off because of him, sounding the alarm.
That's why Air Force is the best.
Whoa. At ease. Out of control.
Just a little unsung hero. I did a little research on this. This is a German invention. Look, who cares? But it had a lot of features that were missed by just about everybody else. You could, for example, one guy could carry 4 of these, okay, empty, okay. In a difficult situation, 2 guys could carry 1, 3 guys could carry 2, and they were stackable. Seems like very elementary stuff, but there was a what do you call him? An attaché, an Air Force, an Army attaché who was watching German maneuvers in 1938. He saw these and immediately followed up on it. And these are still in use in the military. You find them strapped to all sorts of vehicles. Especially on Jeeps. Say again?
Especially on Jeeps.
On Jeeps, yep.
Fred, can you tell me about that silver suit that looks like a space suit?
That is
It's catching my eye.
That's an asbestos suit. Okay, that's for people when there's an aircraft on fire or something, you're trying to get the pilot out or get in and fight it. You'd have that stuff. And there's a great big hood up there also.
Yeah, I see that.
Scary kind of stuff. An embalming device. Nobody can tell me what an embalming device is doing in this array. I'm thinking it did have some mechanical use other than, putting fluid into dead bodies, but that's what that object is. Here you see a wing from way back. The question about do any of them exist? This is kind of the 1930s, so this is a little bit more advanced, and it does look like it's. That looks like I'm not sure what that is, but anyway, it wasn't strong stuff that's going to endure the test of time. Hey, a model of a, I don't know why we keep this around here, it's a model of a Mod-Deuce machine gun. We'll see a little bit down the line, we have real ones. These are a couple of real ones that were picked out of the swamp. I said 14 people died crashing around here. These people went out and gathered up artifacts from these crashes. And it wasn't illegal or anything. There were people who went out and gathered up the expended brass, and supposedly they were so successful, and again, this is anecdotal, I don't know if it's true. They gathered enough brass and sold it, and they put their children through school, or a child, through college, based on these barrels and barrels of brass that our aircraft and training were just shooting all the time. So this is what it looks like after a crash, these beat up things. They would be in the wings, there'd be 8 of them, and that's what these are. So parachute, this is a seat parachute. Makes it a little more comfortable for the pilot, and it's not cumbersome, it's not on his back, it's not a great big thing on his chest, so he's sitting on his parachute. When he pulls this, that whole thing inflates, but it pulls back. It's not like he's got something coming up from underneath him. That whole thing just pivots around. This is your water site. Bombardiers are supposed to, under no circumstances ever, let this be captured during a war. The story was you could drop a bomb from 10,000 feet and land it in a pickle barrel, which is absurd. but maybe to, you know, make everybody a little bit more confident in it. But in actual fact, they would frequently miss targets by miles, you know, due to navigation errors and such. This back here is a sleeve. This was towed behind a multi-engine aircraft that come on down here, you can see a little better, that the aircraft would go and attack. They would simulate this to be an airborne target that they're going to attack. It was towed 1,200 feet behind a Marauder, a B-26, but other aircraft were also utilized. And what would happen is each of the aircraft would have different color bullets. They would take these bullets, and you can see different colors here, and they were painted in such a way that it's not going to foul the barrels. But any one aircraft would have all of their bullets with these colors, different color. I mean, everyone would have the same color. You know, there'd be one aircraft with all red, another one with all green. Okay. After this whole exercise is over, you could drop this. It would be dropped. The crew would go out, bring it in, and then they could look at these and see who was getting the hits. And there's some of them that have, you can see some little bits, like right here, you can see this was, yellow had a hit. There's somewhere there's not a whole lot of hits when you look at it, but there's a couple other ones here, but you could count the colors and then you could figure out how well or bad any particular pilot did. Occasionally, people would screw up and some bullets would actually get into the towcraft. I understand there were sandbags in there for stability on the aircraft. We'll probably also